We Play Tanks. Definitely one of, if not the, best mini-games to come out from We Play. Oh, you know, We Play. That one game everyone got just for the Wii Remote. And yet, packaged with this title was a real gemstone of a game with simple controls, easy to understand gameplay, and let's not forget, kick-ass music. But while the Wii continues to get older and older, many people who love the original Wii Tanks game have been wondering, is there going to be a remake of We Play Tanks? Ever? I mean, sure, we had that one Tanks minigame from Clubhouse Games, but it really didn't feel like it was a true remake. Well, fear not, people, because like with most things in life, the fans are here to the rescue. Yes, it seems as for as long as people have been playing We Play Tanks, people have been wanting to remake it. And today, I'm here to take a look at one of them, and that game is called Tankbox. For this review, I will take a look at the different core elements that make up the game, to see what's good about each of them and what could be improved on. I'll also compare them to the original Wii Tanks, to see what changes there might be between the remake and the original. And then at the end, I'll give you my personal recommendation on whether or not you should get this game. Just a little disclaimer here, I tend to be a little bit anal about specific details, so don't be surprised if I tend to focus on obscure things that others might not notice. However, I would argue that in a game that is trying to be as similar to the original as possible, these details do matter, and ignoring them can lead to an experience that can really only be described as being a part of the uncanny valley, mainly something that is really close to matching something else, but has small parts that can easily ruin the full experience. Anyways, enough said. Let's get right into this review. So, Tankbox. I'm willing to bet that not very many of you even know this game exists. And, you know, that's not for no reason. The game was only released about a month ago. In fact, even I didn't know about this game. I only became aware of it when the developer sent me a message on Reddit asking me if I could check their game out. Now, I'll be honest with you, in the past I've rejected most of these requests. Not out of spite, mind you, just because growing up comes with a serious disease called not enough timeness. However, when I received this request to take a look at Tankbox, I thought to myself, you know, I just got my second shot. I'll have to take it easy for a little bit, so maybe this will be a good way to take some time off. So I accepted and downloaded the game. Just in case you're wondering, the game is not free. It costs $9.99 US, or that's $11.49 Canadian dollars at this current exchange rate. I, however, got it for free to take a look at it. This might make you wonder, is this going to affect my review in any way? To put it simply, no. I am no corporate shill, and I will not hesitate to point things out if they do not sit well with me, and trust me, there will be some things that I will point out. Once you download the game and run it, this is what you will first see, and I'm immediately transported back to my childhood, back when I only had my CRTV and my console late at night, which is certainly enough to bring a smile on my face. This menu system is quite reminiscent of 6th gen consoles, where you could change console settings without having a disc in, and to me at least, it was quite a nice touch. Like most other Wii Tanks game remakes, this one comes with a map editor. Using this map editor, you can create your own maps and save them to your computer. You can then take these maps and load them in later when you want to play them again. All the editor's features are available right out of the box, which makes it easy for people to practice certain aspects of their playstyle before attempting the campaign. The only limit is your imagination. Oh, and maybe the size of your disk drive. The only issues I have is that some of the controls took a little longer to figure out.
Middle mouse button? Really?
And that there is no way for you to take your own maps and turn them into your own campaign. However, I have no doubt that as the game continues to be developed and improved, these issues will be resolved. And that's the map editor. There's not much to say about the game options menu. It's where you change the settings of the game. Such as the campaign type and the levels per negative life.
Whatever that means.
The The only setting I feel is missing here was a mouse sensitivity slider / knob. I prefer to be able to flick my mouse around when playing a tanks game, and trying to adjust the mouse sensitivity in Windows is 1. Annoying, especially when I need to change it back to default after playing the game, and 2. Not enough. So if the developer could add in a slider or a knob for mouse sensitivity, that would be just great. You can play the game with different types of hats for your tank. Some of these hats are decorative, while others will change how your tank behaves. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to unlock them all yet. What I can say for sure though is that these hats provide new and exciting ways to play the game, and they do add an extra layer of personalization to your tank. I like it. Co-op currently only works with controller, which I don't have, so I can't go into much detail about it. It does appear to be quite similar to the original Wii Tanks game multiplayer. This comes with the downside of only being able to support 2 players rather than 4, which might be a deal breaker for some select few. But it also appears to go to 100 levels instead of just 20, and there will be extra lives as well. So, all in all, I would say that it's an improvement from the original. Alright, enough delays. Let's get on to the game and play some Tankbox. Since there are so many levels to go through, 100 to be exact, I won't bother with minor details. Instead, I'll focus more on the core elements that make up the game. The core elements being the controls, tank types, map layouts, and music. I'll end up giving each core element a rating out of 5 based on playability and similarity to the original. Let's first start with the controls. The controls utilize the left click button to shoot, right click button to lay a mine, and WASD keys to move. For someone who has never played a Tanks remake before this one, the controls are easy to understand and use. For me at least. Without the option to customize the controls, others may not find them as useful as I do. That's a little bit of an issue that some might have. The controllability of the player tank is quite similar to the original game. In fact, here's a little test of the tank and bullet speeds between Wii Play and Tankbox. Let's see how close they are. And look at that! They are nearly indistinguishable! The developer really did a good job making sure that their game stayed faithful to the original. Because of this, most of my typical strats I use with Wii Play Tanks work just as well on Tankbox, which reduces the amount of relearning needed to get good at the game. A big thumbs up from me over here. Now, however, let's talk about the big white elephant in the room. Bullet blocking. Those of you who have played Wii Play Tanks enough know that it is possible to defend yourself from oncoming bullets by shooting those bullets before they hit you. It is one of the most important things to learn to do right in order to get good at the game. However, in Tankbox, there are few elements that make achieving this more difficult and frustrating than it needs to be. These elements have to do with shadows, hitboxes, and the cursor overlay. Shadows first. If you haven't noticed by now, Wii Tanks doesn't render shadows for bullets. This is for an important reason. Take this situation here. Pausing, I ask you this question. Where do I shoot? And you can see the issue immediately. Do I shoot here, or do I shoot there? Having shadows for bullets creates ambiguity, something you don't want in a situation where tenths of a second matter. This ambiguity is further complicated by the cursor overlay. Some of you might initially think that, well, you shoot here, idiot. You always put your cursor over the real bullet and not its shadow. Idiot. Well, in Tankbox, that's not always true. See here. Notice how when shooting up and down, the bullet goes over the overlay, as expected. But when shooting left or right, my bullet seems to go way too far above the overlay. Why is that? It's because the overlay is actually tracking the shadow, not the bullet. So the answer to the previous question would be to actually aim at the shadow, which just seems inherently wrong, doesn't it? FYI, OG Tanks doesn't actually do this. The bullet will always go over the cursor overlay, no matter what angle you shoot at. The final issue for this is a matter of hitboxes. First of all, Tankbox uses a cube-shaped hitbox for its tanks, which is wrong. Comparing the situation here in OG Wii Tanks, two square hitboxes colliding with each other would not act like they are here, but two circles would. That means that Wii Tanks' hitboxes are cylindrical. Now why would they do this? In short, it's so that tanks running up against the wall wouldn't be met with weird complicated movements. It's a long story, but this is just the short version. Naturally, however, a cylinder doesn't line up as well with a square tank. To compensate for this, Wii Tank's bullets are a lot bigger than they seem. Take this here. These bullets initially look too far away to collide, and yet they still do. The hitboxes are more like this big, and not this big. Taking all of these small differences together creates a situation where bullet blocking becomes essentially unusable, as the risk of death from a failed block becomes too much to effectively warrant it. Again, I may be looking a little too much at the details here, but as I argued in the intro to this review, these small details do matter a lot. To fix this bullet blocking issue, I would advise that the developer 1. Remove shadows from bullets. 2. Have the cursor overlay in line with the real bullets and not its shadow. And 3. To change the hitboxes of both the tank and the bullets. Overall, the controls for the game are quite good. The similarities between the original are very accurate, and the controls, at least for me, are simple and easy to use. The only gripes I have are not being able to change the controls and the bullet blocking issues I mentioned before. However, these issues are not major deal breakers and won't typically influence casuals who only play the game just for the fun of it. Decent. I give the controls core of Tankbox a 4 out of 5. Phew, that last one was a little long-winded. Luckily though, there is not as much to talk about with the tank types, mainly cause Tankbox does such a good job emulating the original AI that there's not much else to say. Now, I have made a mod for the original Wii Tanks game, so I'm at least somewhat familiar with the Wii Tanks AI, and I've got to tip my hat to the developer for making each tank feel just as similar as the original. But that's not to say that the developer didn't create new tank types as well. I won't give any spoilers on what they do, but as far as I'm concerned, the new tank types are absolutely amazing. They are exciting new additions to the game that will surely add a new layer of strategy to the game. I have absolutely no issues with them. Now, while most of the original tank types in Tankbox are nearly indistinguishable from their original counterparts, there are two tanks that have certain things that make them quite different from the original AI. Those two tanks are the purple and the black tank. The main issue with the purple tank is that it dodges bullets too much. Now, I understand that in the original game, purples can be quite annoying with dodging as well. However, in Tankbox, there's something else that makes purples even more difficult to destroy, and that is the maneuverability. The difference is that in Wii Tanks, you have two different types of turns: normal turns and standing turns. Normal turns are just what you would expect. It'd be like turning a car. But standing turns happen when your tank needs to turn to a more extreme extent. For Wii Tanks, this is typically around 15 degrees or more. For a standing turn, your tank will stop in place, turn on the spot, then accelerate once the turn is complete. Now, Tankbox doesn't really do standing turns. Notice how I can easily make a circle using keyboard in Tankbox, whereas in the original Wii Tanks, I can only make a rounded square. This is because of the lack of those standing turns, and the issue with not having standing turns is that now, other tanks can more easily dodge bullets, because they no longer have to stop. Those stops made during turns is what made it possible to catch tanks off guard in the original game, but that's not possible in Tankbox, which is why these tanks are so much harder to hit. Funny thing, I checked the patch notes for Tankbox, and noticed that at one point, purples used to dodge at 90%. Oh god, I can just only imagine what that must have been like. Moving on to blacks. The problem with blacks is the complete opposite of purples. While purples dodge too much, blacks don't dodge at all, even though they very clearly do in the original game. Now, I'm not saying that blacks are not aggressive. Oh, they very clearly are. They're actually tied with reds/pinks for aggressiveness. But the difference is that blacks will always try to avoid bullets more than reds or pinks. This will give you an opportunity to at least push them back if they ever got too close to you. Oh, but not here. Here, they will come right at you, even if it's complete suicide. This ironically makes blacks even easier in Tankbox than in the original, which doesn't seem quite right for a tank that is held in such high regards. So those are the two tanks that need some revisions. Apart from those two, however, the rest of the tanks are just perfectly fine. I can't say precisely if the more obscure elements for each AI is the same as in the original. That's considering I don't have the access to the game's code. But if the developer's interested in hearing more, please don't hesitate to get in contact with me. I'll be more than happy to provide extra info on the original game's AI if that's needed. Overall, I give the tank types core of Tankbox a 4.5 out of 5. Now onto the maps. Technically, Tankbox comes with 200 levels through 2 campaigns, but one campaign is just the original We Tanks maps remade in Tankbox, so there isn't much new stuff to go through with it. I'll quickly mention that it is quite a good replica of the original, although it's not perfect. Some of the randomized missions don't really line up with what would be in the original game. Like, you would never get 3 blacks on mission 52 as I did here. The game only allows 1 black for missions 51 to 59. Also, for some reason, I always seem to end up with less tanks than I should. Not sure where the missing tanks are though. So yeah. Anyways, let's just ignore that for now and talk about the maps in the main campaign. Now, when it comes to map designing, there are a few design principles that you might want to follow if you want your maps to turn out decent. Now, I'm not saying that these rules are lines drawn in the sand that must never be crossed. Like most things in life, there are exceptions. And it's not like all maps are bad just by not following these rules. It's just that these rules are the most common rules that, when followed, will allow you to create well-rounded, well-designed maps, on par with the originals. So let's quickly run down through the rules. Rule number 1 is symmetry is king. You might not have noticed this before, but pretty much all of We Tank's maps all have some form of symmetry going on, whether it be rotational symmetry like in Mission 3's map, or reflective symmetry like in Mission 10, or even glide reflective symmetry in Mission 19. Symmetry is a big reason why We Tank's maps are so simple and yet so amazing. Now again, it's not impossible to make a good map without symmetry. Mission 70 is a good example of this. There is no good symmetrical point being used here. However, it is still a good map, and that is because of rule number 2, which is to keep it simple. Notice the common shape being used here? It's a spiral. Mission 80 is split into 4 quadrants. Mission 40 is a box within a box. And Mission 12? Well, I shit you not, it's a literal percent sign. A simple map allows the player to focus more on defeating tanks, rather than being overwhelmed by the map that tries to be too fancy. And finally, rule number 3. Avoid illusions as much as possible. Because the camera here is of the orthographic viewing type, perspective is essentially stripped from the player. Objects far away appear the same size of those close to the camera. Because of this, it's possible to create weird illusions. Here are a few examples. These illusions are detrimental to the player's gameplay as they tend to mess the brain up as it tries to contemplate what the f*** it's seeing. Most of these illusions can be avoided by negating continual changes in block height in the vertical direction. Again, I want to stress that these rules can be broken, and good maps don't always need to follow them, but they are general guidelines to ensure that good maps are made. Applying these rules to the maps in Tankbox, a clear trend emerges. In general, the earlier maps, from levels 1 to 40, are just fine, with the only exception being 18 and 35, 18 being a little too unsymmetrical for my liking, and 35 having a line of holes at the bottom of the map that don't appear when in orthographic view. Both maps are simple fixes. However, after that, many of the new maps unfortunately suffer from quite significant issues, which I'll now describe. 40 to me can really be best described as a functional map that was subsequently mega-nuked, and all the rubble that remained was turned into level 40. There is absolutely no symmetry to speak of, block heights wildly vary throughout the map, and there are quite a few illusions to speak of. Honestly, this was my first reaction to seeing this map. This pink guy, and let's move on to... What? Oh, okay, he can shoot through there? Okay, that's freaking weird. Okay, well, this map is certainly something. Really, I mean, look at this thing. My brain cannot comprehend this. Level 60 doesn't have any illusions in it, but I don't know, man. This map just doesn't feel very well thought out. I mean, when I see people adding this many holes to the corner of the map, it just conveys a sense that the map creator was grasping at straws. This map could definitely use a little bit more symmetry to lighten the mood. Levels 70, 75, 80, 85, and 90 together all suffer from two pressing issues: lack of symmetry and linear design. By linear design, I'm referring to the fact that the map feels more like a locked-in maze rather than an arena, where your only objective is to, quote, get to the end. I particularly believe that level 80 and 90 are greatly worthy of sin, because they are also quite closed in versus many of the other maps. For 80, get rid of these blocks, and 90, get rid of these. Just those fixes, however, won't really fix the main issue, which has to do with, above all, the lack of symmetry. I know I'm really obsessing over symmetry here, but it really affects how good your maps may be perceived. When I made my WeTanks Pro mod, I initially foregoed the symmetry in my maps. Most of my maps had quite a similar feel to level 40, 80, and 90 in Tankbox, and in the end, they all ended up feeling very blurry. It was hard to remember which map was for which mission, and they all ended up losing their character. They just became another map. And so, I went back and tried simplifying my maps and using symmetry pretty much everywhere. And the maps became so much better as a result. It just goes to show you, sometimes, simplicity is one of life's greatest pleasures. All in all, Tankbox's maps are a bit of a mixed bag. While the earlier maps are quite fun and, dare I say, beautiful, the later missions all appear to suffer from one big issue, and I really hate to say this, I really do. It's lack of thought. I know that that's not true, and that I know deep down that whoever designed these maps really tried and put lots of brain power into making these maps what they are. But it's not just your own thoughts that count here. It's how other people perceive what you've made. And what was made, these last few maps, just does not properly convey the amount of work and attention that likely went into making them. I'm really sorry, guys. I want to say something better here, but I just can't. On the positive side, though, I have faith that the developer can make amazing maps. They've already proven it with their first 40 levels. Many of them were quite fun to play through, and if the developer can make 40 spectacular levels, then surely 100 is no problem. I give the map layout's core of Tankbox a 3 out of 5. Last but certainly not least, there is music. This may be a bit of an unusual element of Tankbox to review, naturally because music is highly subjective to each individual. Some people like certain music styles more than others. Luckily for us, WeTank's music is something that everyone naturally loves about the original, so we have something to compare Tankbox's music to. Now, there's a bit of musical knowledge that is required in order to understand what makes WeTank's music sound as good as it does. Luckily, I do have some compositional experience below my belt, so I should be able to point out the important elements that make Wii Tank's music sound good, and be able to accurately compare it to Tankbox's version. But before we do, I'll quickly mention the sound effects here. There's not much to say, they sound fine. The sounds definitely have a bit more of a wooden feel to them versus the original game, which, I'll be honest with you, is something I quite like more versus the original. I kinda wish the green tank had a different firing shot sound versus all the other tanks, but I digress. Anyways, let's get towards the music. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with technical explanations, orchestration samples, and dun 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 musical theory. Instead, I feel it's more helpful to just listen and analyze this in a way that most people would be able to understand. So first, let's take a little listen to the original Wii Tank's music. Now, let's take a listen to Tankbox's music. Now pause and ask yourself this. Did that feel like something that would belong in a Wii Tank's remake? If you ask me, the answer is no. Unfortunately, Tankbox's music is, in my opinion, the biggest aspect in need of improvement. Now, some of you may have thought that Tankbox's music sounded good and that there was nothing inherently bad sounding about it, and you're mostly right. Musically speaking, this song is perfectly fine. Well, apart from some weird instances where you end up with something like this.
That's a spicy meatball!
But musical integrity is not Tankbox's issue. It's got more to do with the type of music we're listening to. Here's a little experiment for you to try. I want you to first close your eyes. Turn up your volume. And now, take a listen to this. By reducing the song to piano and percussion and slowing the song down, we have partly removed it from context. Now I ask you, how did that sound? Did it sound marchy, like something you'd play in the army? Did it? Here, let's play Wii Tank's theme in the same key and see what you think. Now does it start to become apparent what's going on here? No? Well, to me, Tankbox's music feels more in line with something pop-related rather than a march. And that's not for no reason. Tankbox's music uses a chord progression that many pop songs are filled with. In fact, most chord generators out there will usually spit these chords out when you ask it to come up with a chord progression. Now please, I'm not trying to discredit anyone who uses these generators, far from it. I believe that these generators are a great way for someone to just come up with a tune and make some music. However, it's important to remember that there are certain styles of music that only work in certain situations, and, to me at least, listening to something pop-like when playing a Tank's shooting game feels very out of place. Again, no discredit to the composer of Tankbox's music. I understand how hard it can be to create any type of music. Music is an art form. It takes a great deal of creativity, time, and sometimes a little bit of luck to create a song that everyone likes. And it's not that Tankbox's music is bad. It's not. It sounds fine. If this song was just some random creation that someone posted on SoundCloud, I would be completely okay with it. I would actually like it. The problem here is a case of mistaken identity. This song, for lack of a better word, doesn't fit with the style of game being presented here. To first emulate a style, you have to know what you're trying to emulate, and for Tanks games, this would be most typically be marching band music. And listening between marching band music and Tankbox's music, to me, there's no contest which one fits better. I give the music core of Tankbox a 2 out of 5. But wait just a minute now, because I'm not done with music yet. Luckily for Tankbox, I'm the kind of person to put my money where my mouth is. Or to be more specific in this case, put my time where my mouth is. Because for the last 2 weeks, I've taken my little bit of spare time to compose what I believe would be a better alternative for Tankbox's music. It wasn't easy, and it took a few revisions, but I'm happy with how it turned out, and I hope you will be too. Now, I won't go into the details of how I composed this music. That would take an entire book to properly explain. But let's just say that I took Wee Tanks' motifs and themes as inspiration for my composition. And so, I present to thee my unofficial version of Tankbox's music. Now that just sounds a lot more like what you'd expect from a Wee Tanks remake, don't you think? And since I liked it so much, I already went through the effort of replacing my copy of Tankbox's music with my own. So here's how it sounds with some gameplay behind it. I hope that those of you out there listening to my composition enjoyed it as much as I did, and if the developer's interested in using this music, just let me know and I'll send the necessary files to make it work. Wow, this video is a lot longer than I anticipated. Anyways, let's get on to the conclusion of this review. I'll just quickly mention a few more things here before I give my final opinion about the game. One thing that Tankbox does that OG Wee Tanks doesn't do is to have mine and bullet outlines visible from behind walls. So if Silo K Hawk is watching this video, I just want them to know that Tankbox has got him covered. Also, in case you all weren't aware, the developer coded the game's engine theirself. No Unity or Unreal here, so you have to at the very least give them credit for that. And if you wanted to, you could play the game in perspective mode versus orthographic, which is nice for those who might want a different vantage point when playing the game. And quickly mentioning the looks of Tankbox, one feature I think would be fantastic to have in the future is an option for people to change the textures and even maybe the models of the tanks and the maps. This way people could customize how they want their game to look. What's even better is if they were to add this feature to a campaign creator. It could allow people to make essentially any style they want, giving each custom campaign its own personality. Imagine playing a campaign based on the Arctic Circle, or the beach, or maybe even space. The possibilities would be endless. Again, just a little idea I had. Now with that out of the way, we get to the biggest question of them all. Would I recommend that others play Tankbox? Yes. Yes, I would. Despite some of the elements I have critically analyzed, like the music, there is no arguing that Tankbox does one big thing right that the other Tanks remakes don't, and that is to emulate the original. While I'm not denying that other Tanks game remakes also try to do this, I mean they wouldn't be called Tanks remakes if they didn't, Tankbox takes this to a whole new level. When you match the speed of the tanks and bullets, emulate the original AI to an impressive degree, and have a classic campaign that is literally the original Wii Tanks game, it just goes to show that the developer of Tankbox really wanted their game to offer a similar experience to the original. And you know what? They absolutely nailed it. While I did point out some parts of Tankbox that weren't exactly the same, they are mostly about more obscure and unknown elements, and it's not like many of them are things some people will notice. I tend to be a more detail-oriented person, so these things are things that I typically point out. But I know that not everyone is like that, and that casuals who only played Wii Tanks for the fun of it likely won't notice many of the things I pointed out here on their own time. Oh, and not forgetting to mention that the game is constantly being updated with new elements and fixes, so that's always a big plus. Now, right before I give my final out of 10 rating of Tankbox, I want to quickly mention my experience with Wii Tanks.
Spelt W-E-E.
Right after I played a bit of Tankbox, I wanted to try some other Tanks remake game before coming to a conclusion with Tankbox. Now, I had heard of Wii Tanks before then, but I never really tried it at that point, so I downloaded the game and gave it a shot. Now, to keep this short and simple, I will say that Wii Tanks looks absolutely amazing. The lighting, the effects, the textures, everything is absolutely polished to perfection. Not only that, but Wii Tanks also has many more features than Tankbox currently has, so there's more replayability to be had with it. Unfortunately, Wii Tanks to me is a case of looks being deceiving, because trying to complete the game is an absolute nightmare. The main issues are the controls. The tank and bullets go way too slow. In fact, your tank is actually 3 times slower in Wii Tanks versus the original, and for some reason, hugging walls results in this weirdness. Also, green tanks can do this, which is illegal. Black tank shots will now lead your movements, which is also illegal. And when yellows lay a mine right before they die, it becomes impossible to remove it until it naturally explodes. That last point there kind of sums up my issue with Wii Tanks. The game doesn't allow you to run out and just kill tanks fast, due to the slow tank and bullet speed. Instead, you essentially have to just stay back, take your time, and shoot them from afar, which is definitely not how I want to play a Tanks game. I'm not going to be a pansy, okay? I'm in a tank. I want to kill things. To me, Tankbox and Wii Tanks are meant for 2 different types of Wii Tanks fans. For those of you who don't really care for exact controls and are only looking for a game that looks good and has tons and tons of new features, not to mention having it be free, Wii Tanks is for you. However, if you want a Wii Tanks remake that really captures the feel of the original, but also has new elements that can provide a new and improved experience, then Tankbox is the way to go. I just want to take this time here to thank the developer for pointing their amazing game out to me, and to you, the viewer, for watching this review and making it to the end of the video. Be sure to give this video a like so that more people can learn about this amazing game. In the end, I'd be more than happy to try and make Tankbox the official Wii Tanks sequel. And before I go, I just want to say, thanks for watching, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and may you all have a wonderful day. My final score for Tankbox is a 7 out of 10.